Is there anybody out there?
The lights in the night sky. Skywatchers. We're watching. We're watching.
Did you see that?
Skywatchers.
Skywatcher on Skywatcher Radio. SkywatcherRadio.com.
Hello, this is Deborah Jane East, and we're broadcasting from Skywatcher Studio in a very, very rainy Pilot Mountain office, and it's just been really dreary for the past 3 or 4 days, I guess remnants from all the storms that are going on. But many of you asked for a guest that I had on in the past several weeks, and so I am very happy that he is going to be back on the show tonight and talking about all the topics that you were interested in. So for those of you who don't know anything about Charles, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him before we get ready to talk about our questions tonight. Charles was put into a situation where he came into contact with hundreds of abductees. His involvement caught the attention of a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. He spoke to Charles off the record several times about alien contact. The colonel had actually met Greys and reptilians. So in the course of Charles talking to the abductees, the colonel and him became good friends. Later, Charles was abducted, in fact, several times by aliens and the military. Charles can now actually is one of the few people that can say that he has been aboard an alien spacecraft and he has seen and briefly spoke to extraterrestrials. Well, how are you doing this evening, Charles?
Doing good, Deb. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Oh, I'm excited about it. You have been one of my favorite guests.
Thank you.
And you know, the thing about you is you know so much about so many topics. It's just never boring talking with you. And the first thing I want to say is you seem very concerned about alien wars going on. Why is that?
Well, there's a few reasons, I suppose. Historically, there's been several examples of people that have reported, even from the ancient past, seeing wars take place in the sky. And it seems to me that now, it seems that this world appears to be under invasion. We appear to be silently being colonized without our awareness of it. In addition to that, we've had multiple incidents where our fighters have fired on alien spacecraft. Most of the time they've shot us down, but sometimes we've shot them down. I'm told that the Roswell incident was not a crash, but the result of a craft that we actually shot down with one of our fighters.
Well, you know, actually, I had heard that too. When I recently visited Roswell, when I talked to a couple of the people that knew the history and everything, they had actually said that. So that's interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, the pilot who claimed to have shot down the craft told someone later, and it got back to me.
Wow. So I can imagine, you know, the extraterrestrials were not too pleased with that. But so if these things are going on, do you think that got it started? Did Roswell get it started?
Oh, no.
Or did it go back farther to maybe when Eisenhower signed the treaty?
Oh, I can't say exactly how long it's been going on, but probably farther than that, I would say. It's well, I don't know how best to say this. Imagine if you were a really hyper-advanced alien race, and you wanted to conquer a planet, but you didn't want to destroy it. You wanted it to be in good condition, let's say. So how would you do it? You wouldn't do it with weapons, but how you could do it is by creating hybrids. You create hybrids. Some of them are going to look, eventually, if you're good at genetic engineering, which they are very good at, some of them are going to look just like us. You basically won't be able to tell the difference from looking at them. But they will only be partly human. So over time, you create basically a colonizing army of hybrids, send them out in the population, and eventually they can work together. They can take control of what matters: military, politics, economics, food supply, communications, networks. And over time, it's possible for them to control everything that matters to us. And we won't know the difference. We'll think it's just because we don't believe they exist in general, right?
Right. So they're invading us in plain sight, so to speak.
It seems that way, yeah. I mean, how would anyone know? Because they're not looking for it. You don't find what you're not looking for, and you don't look for what you don't believe is true. So by keeping the existence of aliens a secret, the general population never bothers to think about it, and certainly never bothers to think that someone riding a bus to work with them might be a hybrid. But they very well could be.
Well, you see a lot of pictures, floating around on the internet with strange-looking humans like, the Nordics and the tall blondes and all these different type of humans, or, we think they're humans. So they definitely, the idea has been around for a while.
It has been, and some of the alien races, there's literally dozens of alien races that the government is aware of. 62 is the last number I heard. Nobody knows why, but not all of them, but most of them are bipedal, upright, basically humanoid form. Even the reptilians, which are basically intelligent dinosaurs, but they walk upright, 2 arms, 2 legs, just like we do. And I'm told that some of the aliens, you basically couldn't tell the difference from looking at them.
And from what I've heard, they have high IQs. Is that correct?
You're talking about the reptilians?
The reptilians.
The reptilians, according to my information, which is it's been immaculate from this particular source, they have an average IQ of about 200, which is drastically higher than Einstein. And they can speak every language that we're aware of fluently.
That means we're in a lot of trouble.
Well, we are the dumb kids on the block. We're the least intelligent species known, and the reptilians see us as livestock, basically. We're a big DNA farm for them to harvest at will. And they're not here for our interests. They're here for their own purposes. And our best interests don't come into play. They're perfectly willing to own slaves. It's said that the Dracos, which are the royalty caste of the reptilians, eat human flesh. The Greys are known very well to utilize human and cattle blood as nutrition. They smear it on their skin because they have no active digestive system, so they have to take in their nutrition through pores in their skin. And they make a kind of a slurry out of enzymes, and they've developed they say a racial addiction to human blood as part of this mixture. They rub it on their skin, and they use it as nutrition.
Now, that is not a pretty sight. I'm just trying to see that in my mind, and that sounds like something out of your worst nightmare movie.
It does, and that's the reason for all those livestock mutilations that you used to hear about. They were gathering cattle blood because that can be used instead of human blood.
Well, I heard in the Grenada Treaty that part of the stipulation was that they would be able to use cows for their experiments or, for their nutrition or whatever. So it's really scary that, that they're using the cattle mutilation to sustain themselves.
Well,
so it sounds like they're after our resources.
That's probably I'm a lot less worried about them using cattle blood than I am about them using human blood. If you look at the number of people that go missing every year and are never found, it's a lot of people. And
it is.
They can't just vanish. So it's and by the way, it's technically it's not the Grenada Treaty, it's called the Greada Treaty, Greada.
Greada. Well, it's really scary because not just cattle have been mutilated. They've actually found missing people that were mutilated in the same way. Their eyes were missing. Right. Their organs were missing. So
and they have found crashed UFOs with human body parts in vats.
Oh, so yeah, you wouldn't really want to make them mad at all.
Well, I don't think it matters what we make them. They are going to do what they want, and we basically can't stop them. And it gets even worse from there, actually, because they.
Well, can reptilians shapeshift?
That's always been what's been said about them, that they either have the ability to shapeshift or to utilize advanced holographic technology, which makes them appear to be something other than what they are. And our own military, Black Ops, has the ability to make themselves appear to be grays. And they use that ability when they abduct people, so that if any of the memories of the experience happen to be retained, the military will not be blamed. The Greys will be blamed, and if anyone talks about it, they'll be thought of as crazy.
Well, that sounds really confusing. And if they have all these techniques available to them, they could really go and do some things undetected and cause a lot of havoc.
Yeah, they do. And it seems pretty clear that the top levels of the power structure, let's call it, because there are elements of our Black Ops community which are completely unknown to the president. He doesn't have the highest security clearance a person can have. I don't know who decides that the president isn't cleared to hear classified information, but somebody does have that ability. And that means that there are operations going on that he's not told about. He doesn't control it. He can't stop it. And those people are responsible to no one but themselves. And it seems that they're most likely controlled by the reptilians.
Well, that's a scary thought, because you know how the United States prides itself in its, and all the things that it does and the respect that they think they have, all over the world, but that reptilians come into the picture and usurp that power has to have the people in the know not too pleased.
Well, I'm sure they're not too pleased, but then again, they have access to this technology. The people at the very top, and there's not many, but the people who do are very rich, very powerful, and they're involved with the classic Illuminati, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Oh, of course.
And what it appears that they've done is they've attempted to strike a deal with the Greys and the reptilians who work together, so that when it all comes down, they'll have some advantages or be spared or whatever. It's always been said that there's a drastic population reduction plan for this planet at some point, meaning billions of people will be eliminated.
So, Charles, have the aliens totally infiltrated our government?
Well, it seems that they have. If you think about something like chemtrails, I don't know if you've talked about chemtrails on your show before.
I don't think I have.
Well, chemtrails are a very real thing. I've personally seen them dozens of times over the town that I grew up in. They usually are done in the spring and early summer months, from what I've seen. And then I don't notice them so much the rest of the year, but they're a very real phenomenon. It's quite impossible to mistake a chemtrail for a normal contrail. The only thing they have in common is they're both white and come out the back end of a plane, but they don't act anything alike. And chemtrails have been analyzed, and they've been found to contain some very frightening elements. They've been found to contain desiccated human blood cells. They've been found to contain artificially engineered viruses, nanoviruses, which glow and blink at one end like they have a light-emitting diode. And they've been blamed for Morgellons disease, which is a very terrible condition where fibers actually erupt from the people's skin. And you can't really imagine any president or responsible military commander which would allow that to go on, much less order it to be continued if they were not under control of some foreign agent.
That is really some scary technology, and all the time you see people talking about chemtrails, but they're not taken seriously. And it's just like, they say, oh, it's just something that's made up. So
that's because people aren't looking. If they look up to the sky and know what they were looking for, they would see them. If you go to YouTube and look up chemtrail assault, you can see absolutely, beyond any question, you can see, for instance, there's a clip of a chemtrail assault on the city of Las Vegas, where the entire sky is filled with chemtrails over a period of an hour or so, and they don't disperse like a contrail would. Contrail is basically just water vapor. And chemtrails are released at a much lower altitude, and they don't disperse like a water vapor of a contrail. It can hang in the sky for a long time under certain conditions, a contrail, but eventually it's going to disperse and evaporate into nothingness. Chemtrails, on the other hand, hang in the sky. They lay them down in grids or in strips so that eventually they'll spread out, they'll merge together, and they'll coalesce together, and they'll turn a clear blue sky over a period of hours into a low-hanging gray chemical overcast. And whatever's in those clouds is coming down here, and we're breathing it.
So are you saying that the military is targeting certain areas or certain groups of people by doing that?
It seems to be worldwide. They're not just doing it over Las Vegas. They're doing it all over the place. They're doing it in Europe. If you look at, I've seen satellite photos of the atmosphere, and you can see big, huge chemtrail grids basically laid down over many different places in this world. And it's been going on for a long time, years, at least, probably 20 years maybe that I know of. And that means that there's a lot of stuff being put into this atmosphere, and they completely deny that it's happening. And if it was for our own good, they wouldn't have to do that.
That's really frightening to think about, that all this kind of stuff is going on. And, we're made to think that human life is the most important thing that there is. The United States is, going over there now to try to protect people from starving to death, and what's going on overseas. But yet,
they are waging war against us. Our own military is basically waging war against us covertly.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And it seems like such a mockery that they would be trying to save the lives of those people over there,
Public
but
relations.
yet they're doing this to us.
It's public relations. Everything is a diversion and distraction, a mixture of half-truths and lies, anything to keep you from seeing what's really going on, or to lead you down a blind alley so that your time and energy has now been wasted and it can't be spent asking the correct questions, looking in the correct places for the things that are really there.
Charles, would you tell everybody, for those that are just joining in that don't know a lot of your story, just how you first got involved? Your abductions and everything, when that happened, and when that you realized that you were being abducted?
Well, it's difficult to know for sure when they started, because my first memory was less than 10 years ago. But long before that, when I was in my teens, I showed something which I've since learned is a classic indicator of abduction. And it's a strange thing, but if you ask around among abductees, you'll find that a lot of them will say the same thing. When they approach streetlights, the streetlights go off. As in they burn out.
Yeah, I've heard that too. That
That used to happen to me all
happens.
the time. Sometimes I'd burn out 3 of them when I was walking down a single block. And it happened. I don't really notice it anymore, but it happened for, I don't know, at least 10 or 15 years to me.
Well, what was your explanation in your mind that was causing this? Didn't you Did you think it was just a paranormal thing, or
Well, I had
did
no
you
idea what it was at first. I noticed it because how can you not notice it?
exactly?
But apparently what happens is they somehow change the electrical field of our bodies, and it interferes with, apparently, with streetlights. And I'm told also that it burns out electronics much quicker than they should, and that's happened to me all my life. My computers last a year and a half, and then they're toast, and they have to be replaced. And they should last for years, but they never do. I'm told that there are some electronics engineers who are abductees who aren't even allowed to work on the military equipment, even though they're employed by the military, because they just burn it up too fast.
Wow.
Just by being
Well,
near it.
that would definitely be a problem. Have you suffered any other health effects, from the abductions that still plague you?
Well, they have, their medical technology is extremely far advanced over our own, really to an unimaginable degree. And this is one of the problems that all abductees run into, is that they say, well, they took me aboard their craft and did surgery on me. And somebody says, well, where's the scars? Well, there aren't any scars, because they have the ability to heal you up just like nothing ever happened to you at all before they bring you back to your home. And they do it, and there's no way you can ever prove anything was done. You might have a memory of it. You probably won't, because they erase your memory most of the time, too. Sometimes they get a little sloppy, and I think that's the only way that people generally can remember. That's, I think, what happened to me. Sometimes they got sloppy, and I had memories of what happened. I know there was one time they basically cut out both of my eyes on board a craft. And this was not an alien abduction. This was a military abduction. Most abductions now, people don't realize this, most abductions now are not performed by aliens. They're performed by our own military. These are craft called a TR-3B, which is a big triangular Air Force above top secret craft. Utilizes alien technology. It's when it has its systems activated, it's invisible to sight. It bends light around the craft using alien tech. You can look right up at it and see nothing but clear blue sky.
I was going to say, I heard that they can actually change their color and their shape as well. They can appear to be smaller. So it's a very scary type of craft, but there are so many sightings of, seeing, I've seen the pictures, of the black triangular
Right, and I've got
shape.
some pictures of that on the ground in a hangar with people fueling it. I mean, there's no question that that's an above top secret U.S. military craft. It's been photographed both here and in Europe.
And it's terrible that they have, I guess, they thought, well, if the extraterrestrials can do this, maybe we should do this too, to find out what some people know. I mean, what do you think?
That's what they're doing. According to my sources, the abductions are basically taking place because we're trying to copy what the extraterrestrials are doing. And I'm told that even the reptilians think that we're cruel and barbaric for the way that they treat the abductees. But nevertheless, it's being done anyway, and we can't stop them, because there's no way to catch someone who has the ability to be basically invisible.
Well, you're right about that.
And when they return you home, they have the ability to return you back to your home before you ever left, and then merge you into your body, which you can see laying in your bed asleep. And then they're gone. And it's just like no time has passed, nothing's ever happened. anyone that was laying right beside you in the bed would think nothing ever happened and you never left because no time has apparently passed. And when you have the ability to do that, you can take a lot of people in one shift because no time is passing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I've had several abductees talk about that, the most common story that we hear is they're asleep in their bed and they're abducted, during the night. But can people actually be abducted while they're, for instance, driving or walking down the street or...
Yes.
They can.
Yeah.
And it can be done so quickly and they're returned, say, like they could be abducted and it might be a second of time passing here in the realm of Earth that they are, but actually they could be gone for a long period of time with the aliens.
It's possible. I don't know how they return people to their cars. It's never happened to me that I know of. But a lot of times people have what's known as missing time. They'll have hours have passed and all of a sudden their car is in a place that they never intended to go. They don't remember how they got there. They don't remember driving there. And they can't remember the last several hours of time. That's a classic indicator also.
Well, I know we've discussed this before, but would you tell me what are 3 things that the aliens look for when they want to abduct someone? They just don't go off the street and snatch people up. Do they have like an agenda for what they're looking for?
Well, there's a few things. Sometimes they take people that they consider to be useless and they use them as food. That's what I understand. They use them as basically food items. That's why you hear a lot of stories about UFOs in the vicinity of battlefields in war zones because you got a lot of dead and wounded laying around the field. Snap them up. They're just missing in action. Nobody ever knows what happened. They're just gone.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
What else? Do you know anything else they look for?
Well, when they are trying to do a hybrid, they'll basically either look for someone who has few or no genetic defects, which means they don't have any inheritable genetic conditions such as a tendency towards heart disease, cancer, diabetes, etc. People like that are hard to find, but they exist. And they also look for people of very high intelligence, people of very high creativity, people who are able to think outside the box, take information, combine it in new ways, come up with new solutions to problems that no one else came up with before. Those are considered to be primary survival characteristics, and that's what they want to incorporate in their new hybrid race.
Well, I hate to say this, Charlie, but you were playing chess when you were 4 years old, and you're also very musically inclined, so you have some of the characteristics that they look for, unfortunately.
Well, unfortunately, I do. It's just been a matter of fate. There's nothing I can do to change that. When I was a kid, I always wanted more than anything in the world to speak to a being from another world, because I had my first UFO sighting when I guess I was 6 or 7 years old. And, of course, it fascinated me ever since. And now I've had the chance to do that, and it was nothing like I imagined it might be. In my mind I thought, well, I would ask them questions and they would give me answers. No, it wasn't like that at all. It was more like begging them not to do surgery on me.
So you remember actually being on board the alien ship. Could you tell us sort of what you remember the inside of it looking like,
my memories, I don't think it was an alien ship. I think it was a TR-3B U.S. Air Force above top secret.
Oh, so you think it was the Air Force?
I think it was the Air Force using Greys they were either using Greys as part of their crew, because I saw humans and Greys working together on those ships. They were either using Greys as part of their crew, or they were using technology to make themselves appear to be Greys. I believe that at least a couple of times they were actually Greys there. But I've seen...
Now that's even worse.
Too. And the only parts of the ship that I can recall, basically, my first memory of the inside of the ship, I was in a big round room, and there were probably a couple dozen other people there with me, and we were all paralyzed. They basically have the ability to turn you into a zombie. You can't think, you can't speak, you can't move, you can't even think of the idea of running away, much less make your legs move to do it. It doesn't occur to you that you should even try to get away. You just stand there and wait. And they picked people out. We were lined up in a semicircle around about half of the wall of this round room. And in the center of the room, there was a very large robot, basically. Excuse me. It looked sort of similar to the robot in the old TV series Lost in Space, except it had a bullet-shaped head, no shoulders, but it had two arms that ended in like pincher claws. And it was picking people out of this group. Some of them, for some reason or other, it decided they weren't interested in. And it took those people over to a wall of the room, and there was a slot in this wall attached to some devices. It was about the size of a mail slot in a downtown mailbox, you know. And they took them over near this slot, and God knows how, they were sucked. Their bodies were literally sucked through this slot, and they were gone. And I don't know why I thought this, but I was sure at the time that those people were being killed.
Oh, that is horrible.
The others of us that they decided were useful to them, they took us one at a time into medical bays and started working on us. There were at least 2 medical bays that I know of side by side. I couldn't see into the other one from the one I was in, but I did see a military officer step. There was a wall with a little break in it towards the outer edge of this craft, just wide enough for a person to step through, and he stepped through to check on what was going on in our medical bay and then stepped back into the other one.
Gosh, this had to be, I mean, with you being paralyzed, this had to be just so scary you couldn't even comprehend what was going on.
Well, there's nothing you can do about it. It doesn't matter if you're scared. I mean, there was only 3 times that I can recall that I ever actually could summon up the ability to speak in any of those situations. And every time I did, I was speaking as loudly as I could, and all I could do was get out the tiniest little whisper. Once I said, "What are you doing?" and twice I said, "Oh, please don't do that." And they did it anyway.
Oh, gosh. That makes it even more frightening to... And do you think that they understood what you were saying?
Oh, yeah.
Was there any recognition?
Oh,
they did.
Yeah, they understood me. Absolutely. The Greys are telepathic. They know the Greys can read everything in your mind. Everything. That's why no president since Eisenhower has been allowed to meet with an extraterrestrial. Because they would read absolutely all the contents of his mind, whether he wanted him to or not. If we had any plans to shoot back at him or to take him out somehow, they would reach in, pull it out of his brain, and they would know too.
Well, you know, that's pretty frightening, because who could have the upper hand against them if they're able to read minds and everything and know, you know, what is, you know, the next step in the play. You know, so that sounds like, you know, somebody's going to have to think of something if they're able to do this and get away with it.
There's nothing to think of, because their technology is probably millions of years ahead of ours. I've seen some examples of alien tech that were beyond science fiction. They're not only something I wouldn't have thought of, they're something I'm not smart enough to have ever thought of, and I'm no dummy.
Well, you know, it's terrible that you know, all this technology is basically being used. You know, some of it is being used, but it's not for the good of people. It's being used for things that are just meant to control, and for the people with money.
That's right, and we've got a lot of technology from the aliens that the public will never be made aware of if they have their way, because with technology like that comes enormous power, and they're not going to share that with us. We've got access to free energy sources. Basically, a free energy source could replace petroleum tomorrow if they wanted it to. But Who owns the oil companies? Well, they do. And they're gonna bleed us for every last dollar they can.
Let's talk about other countries in the scope of UFO disclosure. Russia has always seemed quite interested in the extraterrestrial field, and also Germany. Do you think these countries are keeping things secret from, just like the United States, of things about extraterrestrials that nobody knows about?
Sure they are. They have to. If they didn't, there would be mass panic.
Is that the reason why all of this is kept secret?
One reason. Yeah, there's lots of reasons it's kept secret. One of them is that. One of them is that if it was publicly known that we're being visited and contacted by extraterrestrials, it would make their job a lot more difficult as far as carrying out their own agenda. It's a lot harder to abduct people if everybody knows people are being abducted.
That's true. And I recently did a show. You were talking earlier about all the people that disappear. I mean, there are millions of people that disappear, and nobody ever finds a trace of them.
That's right. And if you think of 1 million people as about, well, I'll say it's a city slightly larger than Seattle, Washington, where I'm from. Where do you hide 1 million people? You don't hide 1 million people. They just vanish.
And that's the scary thing. And my research, unfortunately, showed that a lot of the missing are young or children.
Right.
And of course,
because their bodies, their flesh has not yet been polluted by caffeine and nicotine. They taste better. They're like veal.
And I thought about that. It's probably what you said, because they, number one, children are easy to abduct because they wander off all the time. There's not a day that goes by that you don't see a missing child. And of course, some of them are kidnapped or killed by really horrible people. I'm not talking about those numbers. I'm talking about the numbers of people that they never find a trace. Sometimes,
though, millions of them.
There are, and sometimes, though, they do find some articles of clothing, neatly, all of the clothing that the missing person was wearing, and just stacked up in a pile somewhere, but they don't find a trace of the body. So, yeah, some really, frightening statistics. And, in parks, in my own state of North Carolina, Brown Mountain, everybody has heard of the Brown Mountain Lights.
Yep.
Well, there was an incident where a bunch of campers were close to that park, and there was actually 2 police officers. They all disappeared overnight when those lights were seen by people. And they have a saying now, when the lights show up, people disappear.
Yep.
And there are a large number that are in parks, all over the world. So it's a frightening aspect to look about.
Absolutely. If you ever see a
abduction.
UFO, don't ever be tempted to approach it. Don't ever be tempted to approach a UFO, because you don't know who they are. You don't know what they're doing. You better just hope that you're not the one they came for. And don't get in their way. Don't become a target of opportunity by deciding to go up and knock on their door.
So I guess my next question, I'll really get you going, because we have discussed this. There are a lot of people out there who are trying to make contact, and, and they're trying to attract UFOs and spaceships and stuff.
Yeah.
So that really bothers you a lot.
Well, I think that there's a few aspects of that to think about. One of them is that there certainly are ET races which are friendly towards us. There's no doubt about it. But the problem is, and that's who a lot of these people are trying to make contact with. And there are ways to do that. The problem is that those particular groups are to the best of my ability to tell, they are not nearly as numerous here. They are not nearly as powerful here as the negative groups. Perhaps they are not even officially allowed to come here very much, if at all, because we basically signed the Greada Treaty with the wrong side after they told us not to. I mean, they met with us first. The Pleiadians met with us first. They met with President Eisenhower and his advisors, and they warned us against the reptilians and the Greys. And they offered us a treaty which we rejected. And not only that, we killed their ambassador by accident.
Now, yes, we've talked about that before. That probably really ticked them off quite a bit. Would you just touch on that briefly again?
Well, they offered basically to give us technology that would help us solve some of our earthly problems, such as pollution, energy, etc. But they had a condition, which was that before they refused to give us military technology, which of course is the first thing we asked for. They refused to give us military technology, and the requirement for their help was that we first had to eliminate all nuclear weapons. Now, the military, of course, refused to do that. One of the reasons is because the thought occurred to them that those might be the only weapons we had that were in use against them if they turned out to be hostile. So it was absolutely out of the question. And we rejected that. And at some point during the meeting, a silent alarm was triggered, and guards rushed into the room and thought Eisenhower was in danger, and they blew a hole right through the chest of the alien ambassador, the Pleiadian.
Not a pretty thing to think about. So I'm surprised they didn't attack us right then.
Well, the Pleiadians are peaceful. I mean, if any of these civilizations wanted to attack us, we would. I mean, it wouldn't be a problem. All they have to do is drop a big rock down from space, and we'd be wiped out. That's the primitive way, and don't think that they don't have far better weapons than that.
Oh, I'm sure they do. But the bad thing about this is we wouldn't even be told about it.
Right.
We're not told about this stuff now that's going on.
Well, we wouldn't be told about it because there'd be panic, and it wouldn't do any good. We couldn't stop them, whether they told us or whether they didn't tell us. And as it is now, it's very plausible to think that we could be silently colonized by an army of hybrids that we don't even know exist, who have the ability to work together. They're placed into positions of power. They're bred together to keep their genetics intact. As you notice, all the European royalty all marries their relatives. There's a reason for that. And the reason is it's said that they have reptilian bloodlines going way back. And eventually, those of us who are left, we wouldn't control our food supply or our military or our government or any of our communications networks. We would be powerless, and we would do what we were told, or we would starve to death. We would be slaves.
So we're not really in control, are we, Charles?
We're very far from being in control. And the people who have access to this technology, basically, well, one thing they have access to is extremely advanced medical tech, meaning that if they get cancer, it can be cured. There is a cure for cancer. We're just not told about it. And we won't be told about it ever if they have their way. They can cure basically any disease. They can create a clone so that when your body becomes old and worn out, they can actually literally take your consciousness, your soul as we would call it, the entire contents of your mind and personality, and remove it from your body and place it into another body. I've had it done to me.
That's really frightening.
That means that you can get a clone every time your body wears out, and you basically have eternal life, and they're not going to share that with anybody, and they'll kill anyone to protect that. There's no king or president anywhere who's powerful enough to make them not kill them, and they have the power to do it.
Can you imagine how somebody evil would abuse that kind of power?
Absolutely. You think, well, we wouldn't do that. Well, we wouldn't do that. They would do it, and they do it.
Let's talk about scientific proof of abductions. You talked to many hundreds of people, thousands of people. Can you tell me some of the things that they talked about when they were suspecting that they had been abducted? Because we have many listeners who are thinking that they have been abducted, but they don't know what to look for.
Well, first of all, there's no such thing as scientific proof of an abduction because they make sure that you can't have proof of an abduction. That's part of the deal, of course. If you could prove it, why this conversation would be entirely different. They make sure that you can't prove it. But there are indications that are very common within the abductee community. One of them is the streetlight thing I mentioned. One of them is burning out electronics. One of them is missing time. One of them is if you ever had a dream when you were a little kid of pirates or robbers or in your room at night, they were probably grays and your memory was camouflaged.
What about implants?
Implants are very commonly put in. I believe that's what they did to me when they took my eyes out, which was a very uncomfortable memory. But they can be put in various places in the body, but most commonly they're put very high up into the nasal passages so that they're actually right touching the brain itself. And any attempts to remove an implant like that result in the death of the patient.
Well, what are they using it for? Is it for tracking or is it for something else entirely?
They can be used for lots of things. Tracking is certainly one of them. It's just like you put a tracking tag in the ear of an elk, you know. You can't hide from them after that. No matter where you move, no matter where you go, they can always find you. Another thing is that they can be used to control the minds of the victims. They can be used to bring on emotions. They can be used to initiate certain actions against your will, without your knowledge, anytime at their leisure.
That's
they can make you get up in the middle of the night and walk outside and snap you from outside if they want to. And I've talked to people that's happened to them. It's never happened to me, but it can be done. The military has, and again, I'm talking about the military now because most abductions now are performed by the military. Not all, but most. And they have been given access to a lot of technology, which is not only more advanced than anything we've heard of, it's beyond your imagination what they can do. I mean, they literally, I don't know if you've ever seen the film clips of, for instance, holographic airplanes. Have you ever seen those?
I don't think I have.
Well, there are people who have filmed airplanes, often spraying chemtrails, and the airplanes actually change form as they move across the sky. The wings will move from the bottom of the craft to the top of the craft. The craft will change, a new nose will pop out on the craft. Sometimes they've actually filmed a flying disc lit up like the 4th of July that will morph as you watch it on film into an airplane. And you think you're looking at an airplane, but it's really just extremely advanced hologram. There's another thing that some people say they're doing. I don't know whether this is true, but we now have the ability for civilians to look at the moon in quite clear detail from Earth. We have pretty powerful telescopes that anyone with some money can purchase, right?
Right.
Well, if you can look at the moon in that close a detail, you're likely to see things there that they don't want you to see, such as alien bases, which do exist on the moon. And so it's been said, and it's been filmed several times. I don't know if the films are real or not. I can't speak to that from experience, but it's certainly something to think about, which makes it appear that when you look at the moon, what you're actually seeing is a holographic representation which covers the moon and moves with it in the sky and prevents you from actually seeing the real surface of the moon.
Gosh, that's something I've never heard of before.
They've got tech that's beyond science fiction, and because they do, people don't believe it could exist. They don't think it's possible. They think that's too far out. Hey, man, if it's too far out, you better pay attention because that's what this is all about. It's called high strangeness, and it's the norm. It's not the exception.
Well, when the colonel told you a lot of information about what was going on, how did he feel about it? Did he feel like the technology was way over his head that they were learning, or?
Oh, sure, yeah. He said that when he met reptilians, excuse me just a moment here. He said that when he'd met reptilians, he felt like a chimpanzee surrounded by geniuses. He didn't like them. He didn't want them here. There's nothing he could do about it. He said, we work together, but they're not our friends. And he was also quite opposed to the way that the military is treating us. He said, because I was, even back then, which was in the 90s, I was worried about alien invasion, let's say. He said, you're worried about the wrong thing. He said, you're in a lot more danger from our own military than you are from the visitors. He always called them the visitors.
The visitors.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I've lived to see that. I believe he's right. I believe our military is far more threatening to us than the visitors are. I mean, they're not the ones spraying chemtrails into our air.
Well, that's right. You know, it seems like the military has far more devious things going on, especially in the point that a lot of abductions or major sightings like Rendlesham and Roswell, all these different things, they go to such lengths to keep it hidden.
Right.
Even you and I have discussed to the point that they would kill somebody if they had to.
It's happened dozens of times. I mean, if somebody gets too close and makes too much noise, they take them out because it's better than having someone publicly talking about things that they want kept quiet. Phil Schneider was killed for that reason, and so have a lot of other people been.
Yes, I recently interviewed Nick Redfern, and he had uncovered quite a lot of people that had suspicious deaths that were, that knew a lot of UFO information that mysteriously fell off of balconies or,
right.
Other
committed
suicides.
Suicide by 3 shotgun blasts to the head. By that one.
Yeah.
Man. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a little bit crazy. Well, I have a couple of questions I just got sent in by some listeners, and I think I have time to ask you a couple here quickly. Somebody wants to know, can UFOs cause missiles to misfire?
They absolutely can, and they have, on a number of occasions, UFOs have appeared near our ICBM bunkers. And as soon as they did, all the control systems of the missiles shut down throughout the bunker. We couldn't launch them. We couldn't arm them. We couldn't shoot them if we had to. And in Russia, they've had one incident that I know of where UFOs appeared near one of their ICBM bunkers and activated their missiles and started them on countdown to fire towards the United States. And then a couple seconds before the missile, and they were completely out of control. They couldn't stop the missiles from firing. And a couple of seconds before the missiles were going to blast off, their control systems came back. The UFOs went away. They were just showing us that they could cause Armageddon if they wanted to, or they could prevent us from causing it ourselves if they wanted to.
Now that is a message. That is a message. I hope somebody pays attention. The next question I have is, are there genetic experiments going on between aliens and humans? I guess meaning to make a type of alien that would have human characteristics but would retain the majority of their knowledge and...
Sure. It's not knowledge so much as it is abilities and genetics. I mean, if you think about it, this is kind of a detached way of looking at things, but if you take a step back and think about it, all of life is nothing but genetic warfare. It's a never-ending battle between DNA. For instance, a black widow spider has no purpose in life but to try to cover the face of the planet with little baby black widow spiders. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It wants to dominate all of their genetics. Well, galactically, it's the same way. And I think, as we talked about before, the Greys have a problem that they're going to be faced eventually with extinction, and they know it. And so they're trying to send some part of themselves forward into the future by hybridizing with humans, which will basically give them a way to reproduce. They won't be completely Greys, but they'll be partly Greys.
Wow, that's a frightening
And they're not the only ones that are doing it.
Aspect.
Yeah, sure it is. And they're not the only ones that are doing this. And the military is doing it too. The military has produced their own hybrids, and they are currently producing them. They're doing terrible genetic experimentation, which results in basically malformed monsters who are kept in cages throughout their lives rather than, they don't have anything else to do with them. So they just lock them in the basement of Dulce Base, and they keep them there in cages.
And see, this makes me ask, who really is in control? I mean, we think the president is in control of the United States, but
No.
if these type of experiments are going on, it has to be somebody really that doesn't have a whole lot of scruples if they could do something like that.
Sure. And there's no way to know that the president himself isn't controlled either. How would you know? I mean, there's another aspect to this I don't think we talked about, which is astral abductions. The astral plane, which is something that's spoken about by mystics, witches, etc. As it turns out, it's a real thing. It's an energy dimension. You can think of it as the fifth dimension. And there are dimensions above that where energy exists. It can carry out different functions without a physical body. People can be abducted astrally, and people can be literally possessed. You can't tell the difference between someone who's been possessed and controlled by a reptilian and a classic description of demonic possession. They can possess, they can control you, they can shadow you in the energy field. They can be present in your room without you ever knowing it, and they can watch you. You'd never know it because they're invisible to sight when they do that. And I don't know if they have that ability naturally or if they enhance it technically or what. Probably some of both. But it's terrifying, and I think there's a lot more extraterrestrials here than people want to believe. I don't know. Did you ever happen to see the clip of Russian Prime Minister Medvedev speaking about aliens a few months back here?
Yes, I did.
They asked him.
That was really surprising.
Yes, it certainly was, wasn't it? Russia's had several statements like that lately. But they asked him how many were here, and he said, "I can't tell you because if I did, the panic would begin."
Yeah, and I thought he wasn't afraid that he would appear crazy or anything. He came out and said that and actually stunned all his constituents.
Yeah.
So that was really, I don't know if it was a slip of the tongue. He didn't mean to do it.
No, he did it on purpose because it was a response to a TV reporter's question. That lady he was talking to was a network news reporter from Russia. And they had just concluded an interview with him, and she was speaking to him after the interview, but the cameras were still rolling.
That's amazing. And, we didn't hear very much about it afterwards, after the initial headline. So I guess, it's trying to be swept under the rug, so to speak.
Sure. They sweep it all under the rug. And the networks are all, our United States communications networks are controlled by some of the most conservative companies in the whole world. If you look at ABC, NBC, and CBS, they're owned by Time Warner, Disney, and General Electric.
That's right.
General Electric makes a lot of money producing fighter engines, engines for cruise missiles, etc.
Wow. Who knew? Who knew?
Right, and the bottom line fact in the big leagues is the president can make a phone call and jerk the broadcast licenses of every one of those networks by today if he wanted to, and they'd be out of existence, and they know it. All you have to do is call the president of the network and say, don't say anything about UFOs or your network dies that day. And they won't say anything about UFOs, and they don't.
Yeah, I'll have to say that. You very rarely see anything much, about UFOs. A few documentaries and some things on the History Channel, but
when you see a
that's
documentary,
basically it.
You're seeing information which has been carefully manicured and is being leaked intentionally, and it will throw you off the trail.
And a lot of these shows, these producers know how to put their hype up, because they give you a tagline and you think you're going to see real evidence, and at the end of the show they say, well, what do you think?
Right. And then they roll their eyes.
Yeah, they roll their eyes, and you think, well, I didn't learn any more from watching this whole show than if I hadn't have watched it. So
right. And
it's
they
a
always
lot
make
of
sure to include some scientists in there that they think they're doing the right thing, because they're basically, they need to get over themselves, because they'll tell you why it can't be true, it can't be this, it can't be that, and none of the things they say are actually scientifically grounded. It's all a matter of dogmatism and deciding you know the answer before you hear what the question is.
Well,
let's say, well, if aliens are really here, you need to bring me an interstellar engine from a starship. Yeah, right, buddy. How am I going to get one of those? I'm going to walk up to UFO craft and get myself shot at a crash site by the military? I don't think so. They say, well, they're too far away. They can't get here. The distances are so vast. Well, somebody's here, pal. It's not my job to tell you how they got here. It's your job to figure. I mean, somebody's handling that. Believe me. It's not.
They think they have all. They think they have all the answers.
If somebody's here, it's obvious that somebody has a way to get here.
Exactly. And if they got here and they've been here for a long time, and if our history is correct, and a lot of the pictures in the Sumerian culture, Mayan culture, all these different things and artifacts and stuff, then how did they get here? They certainly had the technology, because we can't even, we haven't been to a whole lot of planets and stuff yet. We certainly have only sent probes and stuff out into the outer limits of the universe.
Well, we have been to Mars, but that's not public knowledge.
Yeah, I noticed that NASA seems quite interested in Mars and getting humans to Mars.
Well, that
was interesting.
There will never be a public manned mission back to the moon or to Mars in our lifetimes. They can't have one.
Well, I did read an article recently that said that someone from the military said he just came back from Mars, and he had been there for a lot of years doing things. And I thought, well, why would somebody say something like that?
Well, it's believed that we do have a permanent colony on the moon, a small permanent colony on Mars, and there's reason to believe that could be the case. But if it is, it's a small colony, and we're not welcome there. I mean, there's a reason that nobody has sent a man beyond Earth's orbit in 40-some years now. And it's not because we're not interested in going to Mars. We've got hyper-advanced technology available to us they've got ships that can fly to the moon in about 90 minutes now.
That's incredible.
They've got reportedly portals which you can step through and be on Mars. That's a reptilian technology that the reptilians can use to also step through a portal and be in your damn bedroom.
Wow. That is farther than our imaginations can even comprehend.
Certainly is.
That kind of technology is available.
High strangeness. It's beyond science fiction.
Hey, that's my new word, high strangeness. I like that. I just hate what it means.
Yeah.
But, Charles, I tell you, you are a wealth of information, and for all the people out there listening,
that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, and I'm very excited. You're going to be on DJ Flame's show at 9 o'clock Mountain Time on UFOradio.pro, and you'll be talking about some more things. But
I don't know.
I for one, I'm so lucky that you have come forward to speak the truth, because there's not a whole lot of people that do that.
Somebody has to
anymore.
do it. I mean, it's our only chance, and I do it. Nobody listens. I do it anyway because
Oh.
somebody has to try, and I don't care if people believe me. I don't care if they think I'm crazy. That's up to them to decide. I shoot straight. I tell it as it is to the best of my ability, and I hope that somehow it'll do some good.
Well, you know what, Charles? I, for one, believe you. And I want to thank you for being on Skywatcher's radio show, and I hope that the opportunity comes back in the future that you can write a book and tell more details and more things, because I know I, for one, am extremely interested in it, and I think the people that listen to UFO radio, this is what they live for, to get new information about new technology, things that we deserve as humans to know about.
That would be quite a book.
Do you have any last things you want to say before we sign off?
Yeah. Anything that the government tells you about Mars or the moon or aliens, don't believe a word of it. It's all public relations. It's a diversion. It's lies mixed with truth. They mix a little truth in so that you think, well, I know that's true. Anything that they tell you about human evolution, it's a lie. Don't believe it. NASA has known all about aliens since the day it was formed. There is no need for them to explore Mars. They've already been there. That's why we don't send probes to the planet. Somebody already told us all about them.
Wow. Well, Charles, you just certainly made my life a whole lot easier. If we don't believe all that propaganda, then we're ahead of the game.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, thank you so much again, Charles, for being on the show. I hope everybody will tune in later for DJ Flame on UFOradio.pro for more from Charles. Thank you, Charles. This is Deborah Jane East signing off from Skywatcher Radio.
You've been listening to Skywatcher Radio Show.
Is there anybody out there?
If you'd like to be a guest on the show, contact us through our website, skywatcherradio.com, or on our Facebook page.